The wind tasted like pulverized bone. In northern Wyoming in the year 1883, the drought had ground everything down to its essential, desperate parts. The sky was a high, merciless blue, bleached by a sun that offered heat but no hope of rain. Dust settled on everything, a gritty brown shroud that covered the raw lumber of Ash Ford. The town itself was a scar, dug into the land beside the gleaming, hungry parallel lines of the railroad. Judge Silas Pike's railroad. The steel was crawling west, and Ash Ford was the blister it had raised on the earth. It was a town of two main arteries, the street that led to the future depot, and the one that housed the Good Hope Saloon and, directly across the rutted track, the First Methodist Chapel. The souls of the townsfolk were caught in the dust that swirled between them. From the window of the Mercantile, Ada Mae Fletcher watched that dust. At 19, she had learned to make herself small, to seem as plain and uninteresting as the calico of her dress. Her mother was long gone, leaving her the stepdaughter, the inconvenient property, of Judge Pike. He was not a man of law, but a man who used the law, bending it like hot steel until it served the shape of his ambition. Ada's hands were clasped at her waist, but they were not idle. Her fingers practiced the knots Sister Agnes had taught her, the ones for suturing, for binding a splint tight and true. That was her secret. The years at the convent school had not just been for posture and scripture. She had spent them in the infirmary, learning the body's weaknesses and its stubborn strengths from a nun who had seen service in the war. Ada's quiet face was a mask. Behind it, her mind was a map of herbs, bandages, and escape routes. Her one goal, the small, hard coal of hope in her chest, was to be free of Silas Pike. His shadow fell long over Ash Ford, even when he was miles away in Cheyenne. His will was enforced by men who wore no uniform but carried the cold authority of the Pinkerton badge, or at least a convincing imitation of it. Mercer Bly was the head of that crew, a man with pale eyes who never raised his voice. He did not need to. He and his men moved through the valleys, visiting the small ranchers and homesteaders, making offers for their land. When the offers were refused, wells somehow fouled. Fences came down. Men signed papers they could not read, their hands forced by a quiet threat that tasted worse than the drought. The railroad, like a great iron snake, consumed the land. And the land's most precious secret, the one that made Pike's eyes glitter, lay in the Granite Range, Stonewater Valley. The valley, and the man who lived in it, were the town's chief mythology. The man was called Elijah Taka. The townsfolk, in their fear and grudging respect, called him Wolf. He was said to be around 30, a tracker, a shadow who lived in the high canyons. His people, the Red Willow, had been moved on, but he had remained, a stubborn root in the earth Pike wanted to sever. Wolf Taka did not come to town. He did not drink. He spoke, it was said, only when a word was more necessary than silence. He was the keeper of the valley, and the keeper of the ledger. In his secluded shelter, he held the old commitment book, the one that marked the water rights for the few independent farmers and the remaining Red Willow families who camped in the high meadows. He ensured the shares were honored. He was the only law that water knew. This made him a problem, but the rumor made him a legend and a target. The whisper that moved from the saloon to the chapel and back again was this: Wolf Taka did not just guard the visible creek of Stonewater. He held a map, passed down from the old ones, showing the secret veins of the earth, the underground springs that fed the valley, in a land dying of thirst. Such a map was not just power, it was dominion. Whoever controlled that map controlled the future of Ash Ford, the railroad's path, and the entire territory. Ada had heard the whispers. She had seen the way Mercer Bly's gaze drifted to the Granite Range, cold and assessing. She knew her stepfather's hunger. It was a thing that sought to swallow everything land, water, and inconvenient stepdaughters. The air in Ash Ford was sharp with the smell of scorched pine and alkali. The nights were a sudden, breathless cold that sank into the bones, a reminder that this land was not gentle. It was harsh, but it held a core of fairness. The rattlesnake warned before it struck. The blizzard announced itself with a change in the sky. The land did not lie. Only men did. Ada carried her own secret, one that tied her to the mountain man she had never seen. Years ago, at the convent, a small girl had been brought to the gates, burning with fever. The child was Red Willow, and the town doctor had refused to see her. Ada, then just a girl of 15, had snuck out. She had sat for 3 nights with the child, using Sister Agnes's remedies, cooling the small body with damp cloths, whispering to her when the fever dreams came. The girl's name was Naya. On the 4th morning, the fever broke. A silent woman, Naya's aunt, had come to collect her. She had looked at Ada, a long, assessing gaze, and then had pressed a small, smooth river stone into Ada's palm. No words were spoken, but Ada knew. It was a debt acknowledged. This small, hidden act tied her, in a way she did not yet understand, to the very people her stepfather sought to displace, to the community that claimed Wolf Taka as its own. The tension in the town was drawn as tight as a bowstring. The drought, the land grabs, the simmering resentment, it all waited for a single, careless spark. Judge Silas Pike provided it. He returned to Ash Ford not with a thunderous arrival, but with a quiet announcement in the lobby of the hotel he owned. Ada was standing by his side, her hands properly folded, the mask of demure obedience firmly in place. Pike, a broad man whose fine suit could not hide the brutish strength of his shoulders, beamed at the gathered merchants and the nervous mayor. "Gentlemen," he declared, his voice a buttery baritone, "progress requires alliances, stability, to that end, and to show my deep commitment to the future of this fine town, I am pleased to announce the formal union of my family with the hard-working men who pull the wealth from these hills." He placed a heavy hand on Ada's shoulder. She did not flinch. She had learned, long ago, that flinching only invited a tighter grip. "My daughter, Ada May," he said, the word a daughter a proprietary claim, "will be joined in matrimony to a fine, upright man, a partner in our new mining venture." A ripple of shock moved through the room. Ada felt the blood drain from her face, leaving her cold. A miner. She knew nothing of this. She had never spoken to a miner. This was not an alliance. It was a transaction. She was the currency. But as she met her stepfather's eyes, she saw the lie. The oily smile. The possessive hand on her shoulder, this was for the crowd. But the quick, cold flicker in his gaze was for something else entirely. This was not about a miner. This was not about an alliance. This was a trap. She did not know how, she did not know for whom, but as she stood there, the silent, obedient stepdaughter, Ada Mae Fletcher knew this ceremony, this gifting of her, was the first move in a war, and the target, she suspected, was the man who held the one thing Silas Pike could not buy and could not bully. The man in Stonewater Valley. The public announcement was a lie. The truth was delivered later, in the suffocating confines of Judge Silas Pike's private office at the hotel. The air was thick with cigar smoke and the smell of old leather and new money. "You will not be marrying a miner," Judge Pike said, his voice a low rumble. He did not look at her, busy instead with pouring himself a measure of brandy. That was public theater, a necessity for the town. Ada Mae Fletcher stood before his desk. She kept her hands folded at her waist, her gaze lowered to the pattern on the Turkish carpet. She had learned long ago that meeting his gaze invited conflict, and conflict invited his cruelty. A third person was in the room, standing by the window, backlit by the harsh Wyoming sun. Mercer Bly. His presence made the fine hairs on Ada's neck stand on end. Bly was not a man for theater. He was a man for endings. "Your stepfather is a generous man, Miss Fletcher," Bly said. His voice was flat, like the prairie itself, holding no warmth. He is giving you a chance to secure the future of this entire territory. Pike finally turned. He held his brandy snifter, swirling the dark liquid. The railroad requires water. The only water worth having is in Stonewater Valley. And the only thing stopping me from taking it is that animal? Ada knew he meant Elijah Taka, wolf. The government, Pike continued, is sensitive. They listen to the bleeding hearts back east. We cannot simply remove him. It must be justified. His character must be proven forfeit. Ada felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. I do not understand, sir. Bly stepped forward, moving out of the sunlight. His face was pale, his eyes the color of a winter sky. He slid a folded piece of paper across the polished surface of the desk. This, Bly said, is a letter from him, the mountain man. He is lonely. He has heard of your beauty, your docility. He is asking for a wife, a companion. Ada looked at the paper, but did not touch it. He does not know me. He would not. He has now, Bly said, his voice sharp, cutting off her protest. Pike smiled, a terrible gesture that did not reach his eyes. The plan, my dear, is simple. You are a Christian woman, a virgin bride, going to her intended, a gift to soothe the savage, a gesture of peace. You will be escorted by Tom Lyle, Bly added. He will take you to the valley. He will leave you. And your dowry, Pike said, tapping a long finger on a slender, sealed copper tube on his desk. You will keep this on your person at all times. Ada's hand trembled as she reached for it. It was heavier than it looked. What is it? A wedding gift, Pike said smoothly. A land surveyor's instrument. A new patent, very small, very precise, to help him map the springs. And he tapped the other end of the tube. A tonic for the mountain air. It can be overwhelming. Ada knew the smell of laudanum. She knew the sickly sweet scent of chloroform from Sister Agnes's infirmary. This tonic was one of them. A tool to incapacitate. The instrument was to steal the map of the water. You will go to him, Pike said, his voice dropping, the pretense of fatherly concern evaporating. You will present yourself. You will give him the gift. You will encourage his attentions. You are a woman. You know how. Ada felt sick. She wanted to vomit on the expensive carpet. And when he is welcoming, Bly finished. Tom Lyle and 2 other witnesses will arrive. They will find you, compromised, ravaged. They will find a virtuous woman, lured to the mountains and defiled by a savage who could not control his base urges. His reputation will be destroyed, Pike whispered, savoring the words. The town will demand justice. The army will be called to remove him. He will be shot resisting arrest, or he will be hanged. Either way, his filthy claim on that water dies with him. He leaned closer. And the territory, grateful for our help in removing a monster, will sell the water rights to the railroad. To me. Ada stared at the copper tube in her hand. This was the trap. She was the bait. Her virtue, her body, her life, they were all just assets to be wagered in her stepfather's game. She had no choice. To refuse meant a life locked away, or a beating, or worse. But as she gripped the tube, a different, colder thought entered her mind. This was evil. This was a conspiracy. And this tube, this contained the evidence, the fake letter, the drugs, the surveying tool. If she lived through this, she would not be the only one exposed. I understand, she whispered, lowering her head to hide the sudden, cold fire in her eyes. I will do what is required. The journey began within the hour. Tom Lyle was a wiry man with shifty eyes and a nervous cough. He did not speak to her as he helped her onto the seat of the buckboard wagon, only jerked his head for her to get in. He was, she knew, one of Bly's men, a hired gun given a teamster's job. She sat with her back straight, a small bundle of clothes at her feet. The copper tube was in the deep, reinforced pocket of her traveling coat, a cold weight against her hip. Lyle pushed the mules hard, heading west, away from the raw scar of Ash Ford and toward the high, indifferent peaks of the Granite Range. They traveled for a full day. The sun beat down. The air grew thinner. Tom Lyle offered her a canteen once, his hand brushing hers, and she recoiled from the damp, possessive touch. He grinned, showing brown teeth, and said nothing. On the second day, the sky changed. The high, pale blue curdled into a sickly yellow-brown. A wind picked up, not a breeze, but a hot, scouring breath that carried the taste of the entire dry territory with it. Lyle, for the first time, looked afraid. "Dust storm," he cursed, pulling a kerchief over his face. "Hold tight, girl." It hit them not as wind, but as a solid wall of tumbling dirt. The world vanished in a roar of grit and noise. The mules screamed, blind and terrified. Ada covered her face, breathing through the wool of her shawl. But the dust found its way in, coating her throat, her eyes. The wagon lurched. Lyle was shouting, his words stolen by the wind. She felt a sickening drop as a wheel found a deep washout. There was a sound like a rifle shot, the sharp crack of an axle breaking. The buckboard flipped. Ada was thrown clear. She landed hard. The breath knocked from her body and rolled down a steep, sandy embankment. She heard the wagon smash, the final, terrified bray of a mule. And then the wind swallowed all sound. She lay in the ditch, stunned, as the brown darkness of the storm buried her. When she woke, it was to silence. The storm had passed as quickly as it had come. The air was unnervingly still. The world painted a uniform, gritty brown. She sat up, every muscle aching. Her dress was torn at the knee, and her hands were raw. "Lyle," she called out. Her voice was a dry croak. There was no answer. She climbed the embankment. The wagon was a ruin of splintered wood a dozen yards away. The mules were gone. Tom Lyle was gone. He had taken the animals and abandoned her. A cold, sharp panic, worse than the wind, seized her. She was alone, miles from any town, in territory she did not know, with no food and no water. She was lost. She forced the panic down. Sister Agnes's voice, calm and clear in her memory, "Assess your situation. Child, do not waste energy on fear." She checked her pocket. Her fingers closed around the hard, cool shape of the copper tube. It was still there. The weapon, the evidence. She had to move. Water. She needed water. Water flowed downhill, but she was in a vast, rolling plain of foothills. She looked to the mountains. They were closer now, a jagged purple line against the bruised sky. She would walk toward them. There would be water there. There had to be. She walked for hours. The sun was a white-hot coin in the sky. Her boots, meant for the boardwalks of Ash Ford, were scraped and thin. Her throat felt as if it were full of hot sand. She stumbled, fell, and got up again. She was no longer Judge Pike's stepdaughter. She was a small, desperate animal, crawling toward the last hope of survival. She found a game trail and followed it, pushing through thorny scrub oak that tore at her clothes. The trail led into a narrow canyon, the walls rising high and sheer on either side. It was cooler here, out of the direct sun. She smelled it before she saw it, the rank, thick odor of blood and spoiled meat. She rounded a large boulder and froze. It was a grizzly, a huge, silver-tipped male, standing over the carcass of a half-eaten deer. It had not scented her, but it heard her small gasp. Its massive head snapped up, its muzzle dark with gore. Ada could not move. She could not breathe. This was how she died. The bear huffed, a low, wet sound, and rose on its hind legs. It was a tower of muscle and rage, taller than any man. It dropped to all fours and took a shuffling step toward her. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing sound cut through the air. a bird call, like a hawk. It came from the rocks above her. The bear stopped. It looked up, confused. From the ledge above, a small, burning object arced through the air. It was a bundle of dried grass and pitch, already in flames. It landed on the dry pine needles between Ada and the bear. The fire exploded in a whoosh, a sudden wall of flame and smoke. The grizzly roared, a sound of terror and fury. It swatted at the fire, then backed away. Shaking its massive head, it gave Ada one last, hateful look, and then turned and crashed through the underbrush, disappearing up the canyon. Ada was left shaking, her back pressed against the rock, the smell of burnt pine and bear heavy in her lungs. A man dropped from the ledge. He landed on the trail 10 feet from her, as silent as smoke. He was not the monster of her stepfather's lies. He was tall, with a lean strength that showed in the way he moved. He wore buckskin trousers and a simple cotton shirt. His black hair was tied back from a face that was all angles and planes. He carried a rifle, but it was still slung over his shoulder. He had not used it. He had used fire. This, she knew, was Elijah Wolf Taka. He looked at her, his dark eyes taking in everything: her torn dress, her bloody hands, the raw terror in her face. He did not speak. He walked past her, giving her a wide berth, and went to the small fire. He used his boot and a stick to methodically beat out the flames, smothering the last embers with dirt. He was careful. Nothing wasted. When the fire was out, he turned back to her. He walked to the shadows, retrieved a canteen, and returned, stopping a good 6 feet away. He uncorked it and held it out. Ada stared at the canteen, then at his face. He said one word, his voice low and rough, like gravel. "Water." She stumbled forward, her knees weak. Her hands were shaking so violently she could barely take it from him. He did not try to help her, did not move closer. He simply waited, patient as the stone around them. The water was cold and clean, tasting of rock and metal. It was life. She drank, choked, and drank again, the water spilling down her chin. She handed it back. "Thank you," she whispered. He gave a single short nod and corked the canteen. "You are lost," he said. It was not a question. "My wagon, the storm, Tom Lyle." "I know Lyle's wagon," he said. His expression did not change, but she felt a new, cold attention from him. He looked at the sky, already turning purple with twilight. "Night comes. The bear will return for his kill. My shelter is close." He turned and began to walk up the trail. He did not look back to see if she was following. He assumed she would. Ada, with no other choice in the world, followed the man she had been sent to destroy. The shelter was not a rough cave, but a small, neat cabin of stone and sod, built into the side of the granite cliff. A stream, the source of the water she had drunk, ran nearby. He stopped at the low doorway. "You are safe here." He unslung a leather pouch from his shoulder and set it on a stump. "Dried meat, blankets inside. The door has a bar. Use it." Ada was confused. "You are not coming in?" He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I do not sleep inside." He gestured with his chin to a covered lean-to on the side of the cabin, where a bedroll was already visible. "I'm here. No one will pass me." He was giving her the shelter. He was giving her the bar. To lock him out. He was giving her a choice. This man was nothing like the savage Pike and Bly had described. She felt a wave of shame so strong it made her dizzy. As she moved past him to enter the darkness of the cabin, her numb fingers fumbled at her coat. The heavy copper tube slipped from her pocket. It hit the hard-packed earth at her feet with a dull, heavy thud. Ada froze. She bent to retrieve it, her heart hammering against her ribs. His boot was faster. He did not kick it, but simply planted his heel on it, pinning it to the dirt. She looked up, terrified. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the copper tube, his boot resting firmly upon it. His face, which had been unreadable, was now carved from stone. His eyes, when they finally lifted to meet hers, were no longer neutral. They were sharp, intelligent, and glacial. He did not speak. He did not ask what it was. He just held her gaze, his heel pressing the lie into the earth between them. The silence in the canyon stretched thin, brittle as old glass. Elijah Taka's boot remained planted on the copper tube, his heel grinding the metal against the hard-packed earth. He did not ask what it was. His eyes, cold and dark, held Ada's, and in their depths she saw a terrible, clear intelligence. He knew. He had known, perhaps, from the moment he saw her, a woman alone, too clean for this wilderness, too frightened. "Pick it up," he said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the twilight. Ada's hand trembled. She bent, her fingers brushing the cold metal, retrieving the object. It felt heavier now, weighted with the full, poisonous truth of her stepfather's plan. She clutched it to her chest, a shield and a curse. "You are not lost," he stated. "You were delivered." Before she could form a reply, a lie or a confession, a voice echoed from the canyon mouth below. "Miss Fletcher, Ada Mae, by God, are you in there?" Ada's blood turned to ice. She knew that voice. Tom Lyle. Wolf's head snapped toward the sound. He moved in a single, fluid motion, grabbing his rifle from where it leaned against the cabin wall. He did not look angry. He looked like a stone about to be thrown. "Stay inside," he commanded, shoving her toward the dark doorway. "Bar the door." "No," she whispered, her eyes wide with a new, more immediate terror. "You do not understand. They are not here to rescue me. They are here to witness." He paused, half hidden in the shadow, his gaze narrowing. "They are Pike's men," she said, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "They are here to find me, compromised, with you." A flicker of comprehension, cold and deadly, passed over his face. He understood the shape of the trap. He understood her role in it. "Down the trail," a second voice, rougher, called out. "I see a shelter. Fan out. Be ready. He is dangerous." Tom Lyle appeared from the scrub oak, not 20 yards from the cabin. He was not alone. 2 other men, hard cases with rifles held at the ready, flanked him. They looked less like a rescue party and more like a lynching posse. Lyle put on a show of relief, his voice booming for his witnesses. "Miss Fletcher, thank heavens! Step away from that savage, ma'am. We are here to take you home." Wolf stepped out of the shadow. He did not raise his rifle. He held it loosely at his side. He simply stood, a tall, unmovable object, between Ada and the 3 men. "She is not going with you," he said. "Now, see here," Lyle said, taking a step forward, his own rifle coming up slightly. "That is the judge's stepdaughter. You have no claim on her, Wolf. We all know what you are. Give her up, and we might just let the judge handle this quiet." You left me," Ada said, her voice shaking but clear. "The wagon, you abandoned me." Lyle's face darkened. The pretense was slipping. "The wagon crashed. Girl, I had to ride for help. Help that is standing right here. Now come along, unless—" His eyes glittered, landing on her torn sleeve, her disheveled hair. "Unless he has already hurt you." This was it, the moment. The stage was set. All Ada had to do was weep, or scream, or accuse. Wolf turned his head, just enough to look at her. He said nothing. He did not ask for her trust. He did not plead his case. He simply waited, giving her the choice that no one else had. "He saved me," Ada said, the words clear and strong. "From a bear, from the storm. He saved me from you." Lyle's face contorted with rage. The play had failed. "You ungrateful! Fine, we will take you, and him." He raised his rifle. Kill the mountain man, he snarled to his men. We will say he resisted. The two gunmen started to raise their weapons, but Wolf did not move to fire. Instead, he raised one hand to his mouth, his fingers cupped. He let out a sound, a high, piercing bleat, the unmistakable cry of a deer fawn, terrified and in pain. It was so sudden, so strange, that the two gunmen froze. They were hunters, and the sound was a deep, primal trigger. "What in?" one of them began, his gaze flickering up the dark ridge. "It is a cougar, probably," Lyle hissed. "Forget it, shoot him." But the moment's hesitation was all Wolf needed. In that split second of distraction, he was not a man, but a blur. He lunged at Ada, grabbing her arm in a grip of iron. He did not pull her toward the cabin. He spun her around, hauling her toward the sheer, blank cliff face behind the shelter. "Hey!" Lyle bellowed, realizing the trick. A shot rang out, the bullet whining off the stone where they had been standing. "There is no—" Ada began, but Wolf did not stop. He shoved aside a thick, ancient curtain of dried willow and thorn bushes that grew against the rock, revealing a dark, narrow split in the granite. It was a crack, no wider than a man's shoulders. "Eagle's door," he bit out. "Move!" He pushed her into the blackness. Ada scrambled, her hands finding holds in the cold rock. It was not a cave. It was a chimney, a passage leading straight up. She heard him enter behind her, his body blocking the entrance. Another shot, and she heard the bullet thud into the brush he pulled back into place. They were in total darkness. "Climb!" His voice came from below her, calm and steady. "There are handholds. Do not stop." She climbed, her fingers, raw and bleeding, found purchase in grooves worn smooth by time. It was a passage known only to his people, a secret escape route carved by water and time. Below, she could hear the muffled shouts of Lyle and his men, furious, firing blindly at the cliff face. She climbed until her lungs burned and her arms felt like they were being torn from their sockets. Finally, she saw a patch of deep purple, the night sky. He pushed her from below, one strong hand on her boot, giving her the final shove out onto a wide, flat ledge. She collapsed onto the stone, gasping for air. Wolf emerged behind her, as silent as the night. They were high above the canyon, perhaps 300 feet, far below. They could see the tiny, flickering lights of the men's torches as they searched the empty cabin. They were safe. For now. The wind was cold up here. Ada shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. She was still clutching the copper tube. He sat, not close, but near. He was watching the men below. "They will be back, with more men." I am sorry," she whispered. "For the lie?" he asked, his voice flat. "Or for getting caught?" "For all of it." She looked down at the tube in her hands. This object, this held all of her stepfather's evil, and all of her own complicity. She had been sent as a weapon, and she had failed. But now, sitting on this high, cold rock, she realized she had another choice. She looked at him. He was not the savage of the rumors. He was the man who had offered her shelter, a bar on the door, and the choice to speak the truth. "He told me to give this to you," she said, her voice low. "He called it a tonic." She fumbled with the cap, her fingers numb. She unstoppered one end. The sharp, sickly sweet smell of chloroform hit the air. Wolf's head turned, his eyes narrowing. Ada looked at the small vial, enough to render a man unconscious, enough to complete the scene Tom Lyle had come to witness. She thought of her stepfather's smiling face. She thought of the cold, dead eyes of Mercer Bly. With a sudden, violent movement, she hurled the vial from the ledge. It spun, end over end, into the darkness, smashing on the rocks far below. The act was a release, a small, hard burst of freedom. Wolf watched it fall. He said nothing. She turned to the other end of the tube. "He said this was a surveyor's tool. To map the water. She pulled out the contents. It was not a tool. It was a tightly rolled sheaf of papers. She unrolled them in the faint moonlight. She had expected a map, but it was not a map. It was a series of complex diagrams, technical drawings she did not fully understand, but they showed wiring and casings and something labeled detonation cap. "This is not a map," she whispered, her blood running cold. It looks like a plan for a bomb, a blasting charge." Wolf took the papers from her. He studied them for a long moment. His face was grim. "He does not want to steal the water. Girl, he wants to kill it." He pointed across the valley to a high, pale rock face that caught the moonlight. "There," he said. "The Mother Spring. The Mother Spring. It is an old place. He thinks the map is there. But the spring itself, it is narrow. One charge, in the right place, would seal it, collapse the rock. The stone water would dry up in a single season. The valley would be worthless." "And the railroad," Ada finished, the cold logic clicking into place, "would be the only thing left. He would not have to share. He would just wait for everyone to leave." The sheer, calculated evil of it stole her breath. He looked at the papers, then at her. He had a small fire going in a cleft of rock, shielded from view. He held the blasting plans out. Ada looked at the fire. She looked at the papers. This was the proof of Pike's crime, her evidence, her only way to free herself. But she also saw the man in front of her, the man who had used a bird call instead of a bullet, the man who was now being hunted for a crime he did not commit, a crime she had been sent to create. She took the papers from his hand. She held them over the small, hungry flame. They curled, blackened, and caught fire, the last of her mission, the last of her old life. Turned to ash and drifted away on the high, cold wind. He watched her face as she did it. "You have burned your only proof, your way back." "I am not going back," she said. Down in Ash Ford, Mercer Bly was already at work. He did not wait for Lyle's return. He had a new poster printed. It was a crude, vicious drawing of a dark-skinned man with wolf-like features, dragging a pale, screaming woman by the hair. The words were simple. "Wanted," it read. "Elijah Taka, for the abduction and kidnapping of the Virgin, Ada Mae Fletcher." The reward was $500, enough to make every desperate man in the territory a hunter. Wolf led her for 2 days, deeper into the high country, to a place the railroad men could not find. It was a hidden camp, sheltered by pines, where the air smelled of wood smoke and sage. This was the home of the Red Willow people. They were not impressed. The women who were scraping hides, the old men smoking, they all stopped and stared at her. Their eyes were not welcoming. She was a white woman, Pike's woman, and she was a bad omen. An old woman, her face a beautiful, complex map of wrinkles, stepped forward. Her authority was plain. This was Mutta, the matriarch. She spoke to Wolf in a language Ada did not understand, her voice sharp. He replied, his voice low and firm. "Mutta's dark." Assessing eyes turned to Ada. "He says you burned the map. He says you are not with Pike." "I am not," Ada said. "Words are wind." Mita said, "The white man's wind blows hard and carries many lies. Bly has poisoned the town. They hunt him now, because of you." "It was not my choice," Ada said. "It never is," Mutta said, her voice dry. "But your actions are here. We have a sick one. Our old ways are not working. He says you have medicine skill. Show us. Tonight, you will sit with the child. You will keep the fire. If the Great Spirit finds your heart clean, the child will live. If you are a lie, the child will be taken." It was a test. It was a death sentence. Ada was taken to a small lodge, set apart from the others. Inside, a small girl, no more than 8 or 9. was shivering violently under a pile of furs, her skin hot to the touch, her breathing shallow and fast. Ada knelt. She brushed the damp hair from the child's face, and her heart stopped. She knew this child. It was Naya, the little girl from the convent, all those years ago. The fever was the same, the ague, malaria. Naya, she whispered. This was not a test. This was a circle closing. Meta watched from the door. You know her? Yes, Ada said, her mind snapping into focus. The fear was gone, replaced by the calm, cold competence Sister Agnes had drilled into her. This is the ague. I have treated it. She had no quinine, but she remembered. She went to the stream, her movements sure. She found the willow trees, stripping the bark. She boiled it, creating the bitter tea. She sat all night, a vigil of fire and steam. She bathed Naya's burning skin. She forced the bitter medicine, drop by drop, past the child's cracked lips. Mata never left the doorway. As the first thin gray light of dawn touched the camp, the shivering stopped. Naya's breathing, which had been a ragged rasp, evened out. She fell into a deep, true sleep. Ada sat back, exhausted, but alive. Mata entered the lodge. She touched the child's cool, damp forehead. She looked at Ada, a long, deep look that searched her very soul. You are not a lie, Mata said. She held out a small amulet on a thong of deer hide. It was a piece of red willow, carved in the shape of a leaf. You carry a strong heart. You may walk this land. The red willow people will know you. Ada took it, her hands shaking with fatigue. She had passed. Later that day, she sat by the stream, washing the soot from her hands. Wolf was nearby, mending a strap on his saddle. He had not spoken of the night's trial. She glanced at him, her eyes tracing the line of his shoulders. She noticed, for the first time, his shirt. It was worn thin, the cotton faded by sun and rain, but on the side, near his ribs, there was a patch. It was not a patch. It was a long, clumsy mend, stitched with thick sinew, not thread. The stitches were rough, uneven, puckering the cloth. It was the work of a man who had no one, a man who mended his own clothes, his own wounds, his own heart, a man who lived in total, profound isolation. Ada felt a sudden, sharp heat rise in her chest, flushing her throat and her cheeks. It was a feeling so new, so startling. She had to look away. It was not pity. It was a strange, embarrassing, and powerful jolt of recognition. She was looking at a loneliness that matched her own, and she was ashamed of the intimacy of the thought. She, who had been sent to destroy him, was suddenly, terribly afraid that she understood him. The Red Willow camp was a place of quiet, constant motion. Naya, her fever gone, her strength returning with the resilience of youth, appointed herself Ada's shadow. She was a bridge, her bright, curious eyes watching Ada, and then watching Wolf, with a new understanding. An alliance was formed, not with a handshake, but with shared tasks. It began with Wolf, Ada, and Naya. It grew when a fourth arrived. He came on a sway-backed mule, a gaunt man with a face burned by sun and worry. He led the mule right into the camp, and Mata nodded to him in greeting. He carried a burlap sack that looked half empty. Sage. Wolf greeted him with a nod. Wolf, the man replied, his voice dry as the dust on his boots. He dismounted, his knees stiff. I heard Bly put a price on your head, $500. It is a lie, Naya said, stepping forward, her small hands clenched. The man's eyes softened as he looked at the child. I know it, little one. Mercer Bly has never spoken a true word. I brought what I could, some salt, some flour. He handed the sack to Mata. His eyes found Ada, and his gaze was sharp, curious, but not unkind. This is Sage Carter, Wolf said, his voice a quiet introduction. "He farms the South Bend. He is on the ledger." "Ma'am," Sage said, touching the brim of his ruined hat. "You are the one they are all talking about." "My name is Ada Mae Fletcher," she said, her voice steady. "Well, Ada Mae Fletcher," Sage said. "Who you've gotten yourself, and him." He jerked his chin at Wolf. "In a world of trouble, Pike's men are thick as flies on a gut pile down in Ash Ford. They are not just hunting Wolf, they are hunting for you. They say you are bewitched, seduced." "I am neither," Ada said. "Did not figure you were," Sage said, looking at Wolf. "He is not the bewitching type." He spat a stream of tobacco juice. "The problem, Wolf, is the water. The hearing is in 10 days. The county judge is coming. Pike is going to present his claim. With you being a wanted kidnapper, and Miss Fletcher here as his proof, your ledger is not worth the paper it is on." A silence fell over the small group. Naya looked at Wolf, her face full of fear. "We have to fight him," Ada said. The three of them looked at her. "Fight how?" Sage asked. "With what I've got, a .66 Winchester and 3 cartridges. He has got the railroad, a dozen hired guns, and a hanging poster. With the truth," Ada said. Her voice was low, but it held a new, hard certainty. "We do what he is doing. We go to the hearing. You." She looked at Sage. "And the other farmers on that ledger, you will testify that he honors the shares." "Words against Pike's money," Sage scoffed. "Not just words," Wolf said, speaking for the first time. His gaze was on Ada, a new, assessing light in his eyes. "He is right," Ada said, her mind working, the old, passive part of her burning away like the plans she had thrown in the fire. "We need proof. Wolf, the ledger, the commitment book. That is the legal document. And—" She hesitated. "And what?" Wolf asked. "The map," she said. "Not Pike's plan to kill the water, the real map, the one he was looking for, the one you are rumored to have." Wolf's face became still. "That is not a map. It is not for white men's courts." "It is proof," Ada insisted. "Proof that your claim, the Red Willow claim, is older than the railroad, older than the territory. We bring the ledger for the farmers and the map for the native claim. And then I will testify." "Testify," Sage said, his eyes widening. "Girl, they will tear you apart. Bly will say you are a harlot. Pike will say you are a lunatic." "Let them," Ada said, the cold fire in her. "I will stand in that court, and I will tell them. I will tell them about the fake letter. I will tell them about Tom Lyle. I will tell them about the chloroform and the blasting charges. I will tell them that Judge Silas Pike sent his own stepdaughter, a virgin bride, to frame a man and to destroy a valley. All for greed." She looked at Wolf. "He will be ruined. Not you, him." Wolf studied her for a long time. Then he gave a single, slow nod. "We will need the other farmers. Sage, can you gather them?" "They are scared," Sage said, "but they are thirsty. I will try." "Good," Wolf said. "Naya, you will stay with Meta. Ada, you will stay with me. If you are to survive this, you must learn the mountain." The days that followed were the hardest of Ada's life. They were also the first days she had ever felt truly alive. The rhythms of the Red Willow camp were simple and absolute. You woke before the sun. You tended the fire. You gave thanks for water. You wasted nothing. Wolf became her teacher. He was a man of profound patience, but no softness. He taught her not as a woman, but as a student of survival. He took her to the stream. A lady's hook and line is a toy. He said he showed her how to weave a trap from willow branches, how to find the deep, cold pool where the trout rested. You do not fish. You let the water bring the food to you. You wait. He taught her to read the sky, Clouds are not just clouds, he said, pointing. See the mare's tails, wind is coming. See that high, flat cloud, like an anvil thunder. And that, he pointed to a low, greasy-looking cloud in the west, is smoke. The smoke was from a wildfire, miles away, but the wind was pushing it toward the lower valley, toward the small homesteads, toward Sage Carter's land. We have to warn them, Ada said. They know, Wolf said. They can smell it, but we will help. He did not run to the fire. He moved ahead of it. He and Ada, with Naya and Mitta, went to the small, dry bean field of a farmer named Jensen, a man who had been wary of Wolf for years. The fire was coming, a slow-marching, orange line. He will lose everything, Ada whispered. No, Wolf said. He looked at the wind, at the slope of the land. He took a torch from the campfire. We will move it. He ran a line of fire, a backfire, in a long, careful curve, toward the wildfire. It seemed like madness. It will burn out to meet the big fire, he explained, his voice calm in the roaring chaos. It will eat all the fuel. It will create a black line. The fire will stop there, but it has to be the right line. We must turn it, here. He directed them, using the wind he understood, pushing the smaller fire at an angle. For hours they worked, beating at stray embers, guiding the fire, their faces black with soot, their lungs full of smoke. By evening, it was done. The wildfire had met their line, and, just as he had predicted, it had turned. It had moved, pushed by the new line of their burn, up a rocky, bare canyon, away from the farms. Jensen's bean field, his entire livelihood, was untouched, an island of green in a sea of black. When Jensen and Sage Carter rode up, their faces were pale. Jensen looked at his field, then at the smoking black line, and then at Wolf. He said nothing. He simply dismounted, walked over to Wolf, and held out his hand. Wolf looked at the hand, then at the farmer's face. He clasped the man's forearm, in the grip of a man who understands effort. I will be at the hearing, Wolf, Jensen said, his voice hoarse, and I will bring my neighbors. The small victory was poisoned by the news Sage brought back from Ash Ford 2 days later. It is bad, he said, sitting by their fire, refusing to look at Ada. He is an artist, in his own filthy way. What? Ada asked, her stomach tightening. He has posted drawings, all over town. Sage's face was red with anger. Crude things, ma'am, showing you, and Wolf, showing things that, well, they are not fit to be seen. He is painting you as a woman of low morals. He is saying the savage seduced you, and you liked it. He is trying to make it so no one will believe a word you say. Ada felt the blood drain from her face. She had been so focused on her own escape, her own plan. She had not considered this, that her reputation, the only thing a woman truly owned, would be so thoroughly, publicly, and vilely destroyed. She walked away from the fire, away from the concerned looks of Sage and Naya. She could not breathe. She was a harlot, a liar, a toy for a savage. That was who they would see in court. Not Ada Mae Fletcher. They would see the girl in the lewd drawings. She found a quiet place by the stream. She sat for a long time, the shame washing over her in hot, sick waves. She was guilty, not of what Bly drew, but of the original sin. She had agreed to the plan. She had carried the copper tube. She had been willing to be the bait. Even if her motive was to trap Pike, she had walked into this. She took out the small, leather-bound journal her mother had given her. She had a small nub of a pencil. She had to tell him. He had to know everything before she stood in that court, before he put his trust in her. She wrote, the words pouring out, I was sent to destroy you, my stepfather, Judge Pike, and Mercer Bly. They called me the Virgin Bride. They gave me drugs. I was supposed to let you, and then they would arrive and find me ravaged. I am so sorry. I did not know you. I only wanted to be free." She wrote it all. Her shame, her fear, her guilt. She folded the pages, her hand shaking. This was the truth. This was her real testimony. She held the folded paper, her confession. She would give it to him. But not now. Not when he was looking at her with that new, quiet respect. If she gave it to him, he would see her for what she was. A liar, a coward. He would see her as Pike's tool. He would turn away. And that, she realized with a terrifying jolt, was the one thing she could not bear. She tucked the letter deep into her journal and hid the journal in her small bundle. She would hold the guilt. She would carry it until after the hearing. Tom Lyle found the camp 3 days later. He stumbled in, his clothes torn, his face bleeding. He was not carrying a rifle. He fell at Wolf's feet, babbling. "They left me," he cried, actual tears cutting tracks in the dirt on his face. "Bly, he sent me to scout. I got lost. I have had no food. For 2 days. Please, Wolf, please." Ada looked at the man who had abandoned her to the storm. Her first instinct was to kick him. Wolf just stared down at him. "Get up." "I am sorry, Wolf," Lyle sobbed, scrambling to his knees. "I was wrong. I was just a job, Pike's money. But I see what he is, a monster. And Bly, he is worse. He said after they win the hearing, they are not going to need witnesses anymore. He meant to silence me, and the other two." He looked at Ada, his eyes full of a desperate, pleading sincerity. "Miss Fletcher, I am so sorry. I left you. I was a coward. But I can make it right. I know where Bly is camped. I know their plans. I can guide you. I can be your witness." Ada looked at Wolf. His face was unreadable. Sage Carter, who had been watching from the edge of the camp, walked over. He sniffed the air. "He is a liar," Sage said, his voice flat. "No," Lyle insisted. "I swear it." "You smell," Sage said. "Like dynamite, like the cheap blasting powder Pike uses for the railroad." He looked at Wolf. "He has been at their camp, but he did not get lost. He was sent." Wolf's hand moved, and in a blur, he had Lyle by the collar, a long skinning knife at the man's throat. "Why are you here?" "A test," Lyle shrieked, his eyes wide with terror. "A test, Bly. He wanted to see if you would take me in, if you were soft. I was supposed to mark the camp. I am sorry." "Where is your pack?" Wolf demanded. Lyle pointed with a shaky finger to where he had dropped it. Naya, brave and quick, ran and grabbed it. She brought it to Wolf, who dumped the contents on the ground. A canteen, a small bit of hardtack, and a neatly coiled length of primer cord. Wolf let Lyle go, shoving him to the ground. "A marker." "What do we do with him?" Sage asked, spitting. "We tie him up," Wolf said. "He is Pike's, but he is a coward. He might be useful." That evening, the tension in the camp was thick. The betrayal, even from an enemy, had unsettled Ada. She was sitting, watching Wolf clean his rifle. He had an economy of motion that was beautiful. Nothing wasted. He looked up, catching her watching him. He put the rifle down and picked up a length of rope. "You are a poor climber," he said. It was not an insult, just a fact. "The way to the hearing, the safe way, is steep. You will need to know a rescue knot, the one we use to haul." He held the rope out. "Pay attention." He showed her how to loop the rope, how to twist it, how to make a harness that would hold a person's weight, secure and fast. "It must not slip," he said. She tried. Her fingers, small and nimble from Sister Agnes's sewing lessons, fumbled. The rope was stiff, uncooperative. "No," he said, his voice patient. "Like this." He knelt in front of her. "Give me your hand." She held out her hand, palm up, He did not take it. Instead, he took her wrist to guide her hand through the loop. His hand was rough, calloused, dry as the river rock, and warm as the sun that beat on it. His fingers brushed the thin, delicate skin of her inner wrist, where her pulse beat. It was a jolt, as sudden and powerful as the lightning from an anvil cloud. Ada's breath caught in her throat. She looked up, startled, into his eyes. He stopped. His hand, which had been all business, went perfectly still. He was not holding her hand. He was just there. His calloused thumb was resting on the blue vein of her pulse. He saw the look in her eyes, the surprise, the fear, the sudden, strange heat that was flooding her face. He did not pull away. He did not smile. He did not press the advantage. He simply waited. His fingers did not move. He waited, his dark, quiet gaze holding hers, giving her the choice. Do I move, do you? It was a silent, profound question. Ada, her heart hammering against her ribs, her pulse beating a wild rhythm against his thumb, gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Just once. He held her gaze for 1 second longer, and then, his expression unchanged. He continued, his hand moving with hers, guiding the rope. You see, he said, his voice still low and steady. The loop goes under, and the tension holds itself. The air between them, changed by the touch of his hand on her wrist, did not have a chance to settle. He had taught her the knot, and with it, he had acknowledged her presence in a new way. He had waited for her nod. He had treated her not as a captive or a burden, but as a partner in the small, tactile lesson. That night, he broke his long silence. You asked for the map, he said, his voice a low rumble in the darkness by the fire. The proof for your court. Ada looked up. Naya was asleep. Mata was in her lodge. They were alone. Yes, the proof of the Red Willow claim. It is not a piece of paper, he said. It is not for a white man's court, but I will show you. It is a long walk. We leave before dawn. He led her, not down, but up, higher into the granite range, to a place where the wind howled and the rocks were worn into strange, animal shapes. He moved like a shadow, and she, now stronger, her lungs accustomed to the thin air, followed. He stopped at a place that looked like a solid wall of rock, a cliff face shaped vaguely like the spine of a fallen horse. Horseback Cave, he said. He pulled aside a curtain of ancient, dead vines and revealed an opening, a dark mouth into the earth. He lit a small pine-pitched torch. Do not be afraid. This is a quiet place. She followed him into the darkness. The air was cold, still, and dry. It smelled of dust and something vaguely mineral. They went deeper than she thought possible, a winding, downward path. Finally, the tunnel opened into a vast, circular cavern. It was not a natural chamber. The walls had been smoothed by hand, long ago. In the center, hit by a single, narrow beam of sunlight from a fissure in the ceiling, sat one object. It was a drum. It was huge, taller than Ada, made from a single, hollowed-out log and stretched with thick, ancient hide. It was not the drum itself that made her stop. It was the carving. Around the entire base, in deep, intricate relief, was a map. It was not a map of lines and names. It was a map of symbols, a spiral, which she recognized as the Mother Spring. The Mother Spring. Lines radiated from it, not in straight, man-made angles, but in swirling, natural curves. And on the rim, above the map, was a different set of carvings. The moons, Ada whispered, her fingers tracing the stone-like wood. There were 13 carvings, a sliver of a moon, a half moon, a full, round circle, and beside each moon, there was a different symbol, a mark that looked like a water level. It is a record, Wolf said, his voice echoing in the chamber. My grandfather's grandfather taught him. The drum is the voice of the earth. The bass is the land. The rim is the sky. The people would come here, at each moon, and mark the water. High water, low water, he paused. For all the time there has been. Ada stared at it. This was not a claim. This was a history, a living document, carved in wood, measured by the moon. This, she said, her voice shaking with the power of it. This is older than the territory. This is older than the United. She stopped. This proves your people, did not just live here. You managed the water. You were its guardians. This is the oldest ledger of all. Wolf looked at the drum, his expression one of reverence. It is our memory, and it is the one thing Pike cannot lie about. Their return to the camp was shattered by the man who came crashing through the trees. It was Jensen, the farmer whose bean field they had saved. His face was gray with panic, his horse lathered in sweat. Wolf, thank God, he gasped, nearly falling from the saddle. He has done it. Pike, he rode in yesterday with a circuit judge. He had a private hearing. He used Bly's reports. What reports? Ada demanded. That the stone water is unstable, Jensen said, his voice cracking. That the savage element, his eyes flickered to Wolf, apologetic, has been mismanaging it. That it is a danger to the valley. He got the judge to sign a decree, a temporary one, pending the public hearing. He is privatizing the water, for the safety of the territory. He is giving control to the railroad. It was a legal coup. Pike had not waited. He had used the poster, the lies, the kidnapping charge, to paint Wolf as an enemy of the state, and had seized the water. That is not the worst, Jensen said, his voice dropping. Wolf, he has Sage. What? Wolf's entire body went still. Bly, he and his men, they rode out to Sage's farm this morning. Just took him. His wife came screaming to my place. They left this nailed to his door. Jensen handed Wolf a piece of rough paper. Wolf read it. His face was a mask of stone, but Ada could see the muscles in his jaw bunch. He handed the paper to her. The writing was crude. We have the farmer. He looks thirsty. You have something we want. The map, the real one. The one the girls saw. Trade it, or the farmer drinks dust. The old mill at the fork. Tomorrow, dawn. Come alone, or he is the first to die. Ada felt the blood drain from her face. They know about me, about the cave. Lyle, Wolf said, his voice flat and dead. He must have followed. Or Jensen, someone talked. No one talked, Jensen insisted. But Lyle, he is gone. He was tied up at your old shelter. He is gone. He must have seen you. He must have heard you. The trap, sprung by Tom Lyle, had closed. Wolf turned, walking away from them. He looked at the mountains, his back to them, a solitary granite figure. He was being forced to choose the life of his friend or the sacred heart of his people. We cannot give them the drum, Ada whispered, terrified. He turned. His face was no longer the face of the patient teacher. It was the man who had faced the bear. It was Wolf. Bly wants a map, he said, his voice like cold steel. We will give him one. He went to his pack and pulled out a large, cured piece of buckskin. He took a piece of charcoal from the fire. For an hour, he sat drawing. He drew a map. It was intricate, full of false trails, canyons that did not exist, and a spring located in the most dangerous, unstable, rock-slide-prone canyon in the entire range Cactus Bone Alley. He rolled it up. Jensen, ride back. Tell Bly. Tell him the trade is not at the mill. That is his place. The trade is at Cactus Bone Alley. At noon, he will come. He is greedy. He will think he has won. Son, Jensen said, that is a dead end. That is a box canyon. I know, Wolf said. Ada, you will stay here. With Mita. No, she said. He turned, a fire in his eyes. This is not a debate. This is a hunt. I am the reason he has Sage, she said, her voice shaking, but firm. I was the virgin bride. I was the one he thinks. I am the one Bly named on that poster. I am part of this. I will not hide. His gaze held hers. She did not flinch. I can tend wounds, she said. You taught me to be quiet. I will not be a liability. He gave a sharp, curt nod. You will stay where I put you. You will make no sound. Cactus Bone Alley was a throat of red rock that ended in a sheer cliff. Wolf and Ada were there hours before noon, hidden on the high ledge, 100 feet above the canyon floor. Wolf was not idle. He worked, silent as a spider, using the ropes he carried, prying at loose boulders, setting snares made of cured leather. He was not, she realized, setting traps to kill. He was setting them to contain. At noon, they came, Mercer Bly, and 3 of his men. They were not leading Sage. It is a trap, Ada whispered. No, Wolf said, his voice calm. Bly is not a fool. He left Sage at the mill. He is here to get the map first, and to kill me. Bly and his men rode into the canyon, their eyes scanning the high walls. Taka, Bly yelled, his voice echoing. Show yourself. We are here for the trade. Wolf did nothing. He is playing, Bly snarled to his men. Find him. Shoot anything that moves. The men dismounted, spreading out. That was when Wolf acted. He was not near Ada. He was on the other side of the canyon. With a long pole, he pushed a single, large rock. It was a keystone. It did not just fall. It set off a chain reaction, a river of rock and gravel, which Wolf had carefully prepared, thundered down into the canyon mouth, not on the men, but behind them. It blocked the exit, a solid wall of stone, trapping them and their horses. The horses screamed, rearing. The men cursed, firing their rifles blindly at the cliffs. We are boxed, one yelled. Climb, Bly ordered. One of his gunmen, a young, panicked man, tried to scale the canyon wall. He scrambled 10 feet up, and his boot caught a loop of leather. The snare, anchored to a heavy log, snapped tight. It yanked him backward, and he fell, screaming, dangling upside down, his head hitting the rock. He was out cold. A second man, seeing his friend fall, tried to run for cover. He scrambled over a small pile of loose scree. Wolf had set this trap too. The man's weight shifted the rocks, and a second, smaller slide came down. Pinning his leg, he screamed, a high, thin sound of pure agony. My leg, it is broken, I am pinned. Bly and the one remaining gunman were back to back, firing at the shadows. Bly, help me, the pinned man shrieked. I am bleeding, Bly. Shut up, Bly yelled, furious. He was looking at the ledge where he had last seen movement. Ada was hidden, her heart in her throat. She watched the pinned man. She could see the dark, pulsing stain spreading on his trousers. He was not just pinned. He had been hit by a sharp rock. It was an artery. He is bleeding too. He is going to die, she whispered. He is an enemy, Wolf said from behind her. He had moved without a sound. He is a man, she retorted. Before Wolf could stop her, she stood up, her hands raised. Stop, she yelled, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. You, the man on the ground, you are bleeding from your femoral artery. You have to put pressure on it. Inside your thigh, press on it, or you will be dead in 3 minutes. The gunman stared up, his face white with shock. Bly stared at her, his face a mask of disbelief, and then rage. He raised his rifle. The harlot, he screamed, and fired. The bullet sang past her head, chipping the rock. Wolf's rifle cracked. It was not at Bly. It was at the rock above Bly's head. A shower of small, stinging rock fragments rained down, and Bly cried out, covering his face. "Bly!" the pinned gunman screamed. "Do not shoot! She is helping me!" The third gunman, the one who had been snared, had cut himself down. He was rubbing his head, his rifle in his hand. He looked at Bly, who was trying to shoot a woman saving his partner, and he looked at the pinned, bleeding man. He lowered his rifle. This was the seed, the doubt. Ada did not wait. She scrambled down the loose scree of the path, sliding the last 10 feet. She ran to the pinned man, ignoring Bly. "Ada, no!" Wolf roared. She reached the man, who was pale and going into shock. "Show me," she commanded. He whimpered, but did show her. She took her own petticoat, tore a long strip, and packed it against the wound, her hands covered in his blood. "Press!" she yelled. "Press hard!" Wolf used the moment. He dropped from a ledge, silent as an owl, landing directly behind the third gunman. He did not use his knife. He used the butt of his rifle. A single, hard thud, and the man crumpled. Bly, seeing his men neutralized, one by Ada, one by Wolf, and seeing Wolf now, his face a mask of cold fury, turned and fled. He was a good climber. He scrambled up the rock slide at the canyon mouth, abandoning his horse, his men, his honor. He ran. Wolf let him go. He walked over to Ada, who was still kneeling by the gunman, her hands, her dress, covered in blood. The man was whimpering, but the bleeding had slowed. Wolf looked at her, then at the man, then at the second man, who was bound. They had 2 prisoners. They walked back to the Red Willow camp in the dark, the 2 conscious, tied prisoners stumbling behind them. Wolf had not spoken to her. He was angry. She had disobeyed. She had put herself in the line of fire. He was moving fast, and she was tired. She stumbled, and he stopped. "We are lost," she said, her voice exhausted. "You are walking in circles. The camp is to the left." He went still. "How do you know?" "The crickets," she said, her voice quiet. "Listen, they are louder, to the left, by the stream. You taught me to listen to the small things. The camp is by the stream." He was silent. He listened. And then, without a word, he turned left. She was right. Later that night, the camp was quiet. The 2 prisoners were bound and guarded. The problem of Sage was still a heavy weight in the air. Ada, her hands and face scrubbed clean, walked over to Wolf. He was sitting by the fire, sharpening his knife. She was wearing the red willow amulet Meta had given her. She touched it, the smooth, carved wood. She unlooped it from over her head. She held it out to him. "Tomorrow," she said, "you are going to the mill, to get Sage. You will need this, for safety." He looked at the amulet, resting in her palm. He looked at her face, pale in the firelight. He did not take it. Instead, he gently pushed her hand back, closing her fingers around the small piece of wood. "It was given to you," he said, his voice low. "It is for your path, your protection. You keep it." He looked away. At the fire, the sky was darkening, a storm on the horizon. "Tomorrow, I will go to the mill. I will take these 2, and the fake map. We will trade. I will go with you," she said. "No, you will be here. This is my part of it." He looked at her, his gaze intense. "But I will give you this promise. Ada May, I will not choose violence first. I will not be the man on that poster. I will trade. I will talk. I will not be the first to shoot. That is my word." She looked at him, at his strong hands, at the integrity that burned in him, so at odds with the world she came from. The weight of her own secret, her original, shameful lie, was a stone in her throat. "Elijah," she said. He looked at her, surprised by the sound of his given name. "When this is over," she said, her voice trembling, but gaining strength. When Sage is safe, I have to tell you something. The whole truth. About why I came here. About the copper tube. I promise. I will tell you everything." He held her gaze. He knew. She realized that she was holding a piece of the truth back. He had known, perhaps, since that first night. But he did not push. He nodded. "Once. After Sage," he said, "we will speak." The promise to speak was a small, fragile thing. The mountain did not care for it. Elijah Taka had planned to move at dusk, to take the low, fast game trails to the old mill. But the sky, which had been a clear, bruised purple, had turned a sick, greasy gray. The wind had stopped whispering. Now, it shrieked. He promised not to choose violence. Ada had whispered to herself, a prayer to a man who did not pray. But as they climbed toward the ridge of Black Crow Pass, the promise had been stolen by the wind. The snow did not fall. It attacked. It flew in horizontal sheets, hard, stinging pellets of ice that tore at their skin and stole their breath. This was not the dry, hot drought of the valley. This was the high cold, killing power of the granite range. "We cannot go on," Ada shouted, but the wind tore the words from her mouth. Wolf did not need to be told. He was no longer a man. He was an animal, his senses straining in the white, roaring chaos. He grabbed her arm, pulling her off the exposed ridge and into the relative shelter of a massive, overhanging rock. He put his mouth to her ear, his voice a hoarse bark. "Black Crow Pass. Bad. We must shelter. Now!" He left her for a moment, vanishing into the white wall. A ghost in his own element. She huddled, her body already going numb, convinced he had left her, that she was just a liability he had finally shed. He returned, carrying a heavy, frozen bundle of oilcloth. He unrolled it, his hands, bare and red, working the stiff, frozen canvas. It was a small, deer-hide tent, a hunter's emergency stash. Setting it up was a battle. The wind tore at the hide, threatening to send it flying into the abyss. Ada, her fingers wooden and useless, tried to hold the poles as he drove them into the thin, frozen soil. They worked in a desperate, silent panic, fighting the mountain itself. At last, it was done. A small, crude, conical shape, buckled against the rock. Wolf shoved her inside, into the suffocating, musty darkness, and crawled in after her, sealing the flap, plunging them into a world of leather and roaring wind. The shelter was tiny. It was not meant for two. They were forced to sit, their knees almost touching, their shoulders hunched. The wind outside was a living thing, a monster, screaming, clawing at the fragile hide. The tent snapped and buckled, threatening to collapse, to let the killing cold inside. "How long?" Ada asked, her voice a thin tremble. "Until the mountain decides," he replied. He lit a small, stubby candle, and the tiny flame cast huge, dancing shadows. In the flickering light, his face was a mask of granite. They sat in silence for a long time. The only sound was the shriek of the storm and the thwack of the hide. The cold was a physical presence, a heavy weight pressing in on them. Ada began to shiver. It was not just the cold. It was the man beside her. It was the promise she had made. It was the lie she still held. "I have to," she said, her voice barely audible. He turned his head. "What?" "I have to tell you, my promise. I cannot wait until after Sage. I cannot." She fumbled with the bundle at her feet, her fingers stiff. "I cannot sit here, in this, with you, and hold this lie. Not if we—" She did not finish. "Not if we are going to die here?" He watched her, his dark eyes unreadable in the flickering light. She pulled out her mother's journal, and from within it, she pulled two things: the folded, damning pages of her own confession, and the letter Mercer Bly had given her, the fake invitation. "This," she said, her voice cracking, "is what he gave me, what they told me to show you, if I needed to." She handed him the letter. He took it. The paper was clean. The handwriting an elegant, forged script. He read it, his face impassive. "I did not," she whispered, "know what you were. I just knew. I had to be free of my stepfather." "So you agreed?" He said it was flat, a statement. "Yes," she choked, and the dam of her guilt, the secret she had held so tightly, broke. "No, not just yes. You do not understand." The words poured out, cold and desperate, like the storm outside. It was not just to get a map. It was a performance. Judge Pike. He called me his virgin bride. A gift. To soothe the savage. His head came up. The word savage hung in the air. A poisoned arrow. "It was a humiliation. Elijah," she wept, the tears freezing on her cheeks. "Not for me, for you. I was the bait. I was to go to your shelter. I was to encourage you. I had the chloroform, the tonic, and Tom Lyle. He was to arrive with witnesses. He was to find me, ravaged, desecrated. He was to find a good Christian woman, a virgin bride, defiled by the mountain man." She was sobbing now, the full, awful, soul-crushing weight of the plan spilling out. "So he could ruin you, so he could take your name, and then your land, and then your water, and I was the knife he was going to use." She looked down, unable to meet his gaze. "I agreed, because I wanted to get the evidence on him. I was just as selfish. I was using you, too. I was sent to destroy you. That is the truth." She finished. The only sound was her own ragged breathing and the screaming of the wind. He was so still. He was a statue of ice. He did not move. He did not speak. Ada waited, her body rigid. This was it. He would, she thought, open the flap of the tent. He would tell her to take her chances with the storm. It would be a cleaner death than she deserved. He had saved her, and she had been the instrument of his ruin. The silence stretched. 1 minute, 2. When he finally moved, she flinched. He was not looking at her. He was looking at his own belt. His hand moved, slowly, deliberately. He unhooked the thong that held his long skinning knife. The blade was dark, sharp, and deadly. He had used it to gut the fish, to sharpen the tent poles, to save her life. He drew it from its sheath. Ada's breath caught. He did not turn it toward her. He placed it, very carefully, on the ground on the other side of the small tent, far from his right hand, far from her. He had disarmed himself. He had made himself vulnerable, in a space no bigger than a coffin, to the woman who had just confessed to being his enemy. He turned back to her. His face was carved with a pain that was deeper than anger. And then he held out his hand. It was open, palm up, the calloused, rough hand that had taught her to tie a knot, that had read the sky, that had set the backfire. It was not a demand. It was not a plea. It was a question. She stared at the hand, then at his face, her vision blurred by tears. This man, who had every right to hate her, to cast her out, was offering her what forgiveness? No, it was something harder and more real. It was a choice. Her hand was shaking so violently she could barely lift it. Small, pale, and cold. She placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around it. They were not gentle. They were not rough. They were strong. An anchor. He did not pull her. He just held her. The wind hit the tent with a sound like a cannon shot. A gust of pure, glacial cold blasted through a seam, and the candle flame guttered, threatening to die. "You are freezing," he said. His voice was a low, rough rumble. He did not let go of her hand. He shifted, pulling the great, heavy buffalo hide he wore as a cloak. With his free arm, he wrapped it around his own shoulders. And then, in a single fluid motion, he pulled her in. He pulled her tight against his side, his arm encircling her, the heavy hide covering them both. Her head landed on his shoulder. His lonely fingers, still laced with hers, were drawn tight against his heart. Her hand pressed between their bodies, a small, cold thing against the solid, steady, powerful beat of his life. She could feel his heart. Thud, thud, thud. A rhythm as old and steady as the mountain. It was the warmest thing she had ever known. They sat like that, a single huddled shape against the storm. "Elijah," she whispered, her voice muffled against the rough wool of his shirt. "I am here," he rumbled. I am the woman who came to destroy you." He was silent for a moment, his chest rising and falling beneath her ear. "You are the woman who burned the blasting plans," he said, his voice quiet, but absolute. "You are the woman who stood up in the canyon, in the bullets, to save the man who hunted you. I see what you are. Ada May, not what you were sent to be." He felt her small, shuddering breath of a sob. He will still call me a harlot," she whispered. "Let him," he said, his arm tightening around her. "Their words are wind. This," he squeezed her hand, "is rock. We are here, they are not." This was the vow. This was the true alliance. Not a bargain made in an office, but a bond forged in a storm, sealed with a full and terrible confession. They had chosen each other. After a long time, the shivering stopped. She was still cold, but the cold was outside, inside the robe. There was a shared, human warmth. She pulled back, just enough to see his face in the dim light. She looked at his knife, resting on the far side of the tent. "Your knife," she said. He looked at it, confused. She moved, retrieving the blade. She held it, not by the handle but by the metal, offering it back to him. He did not take it. She fumbled in her pocket and pulled out the one thing of value she had left, the small, lace-edged handkerchief, her mother's. In my mother's family," she said, her voice soft. "We had a tradition, for sailors, for men going on long journeys. We would tie a knot, a token." Her fingers, clumsy with cold and emotion, tied the delicate white linen around the rough antler bone hilt of his hunting knife. "It is a promise," she whispered, her hands finishing the knot, "that the blade is not for parting, that the one who holds it will come back." He stared at the small, white scrap of lace on his weapon, the symbol of her civilization, of her faith, tied to the tool of the wilderness, of his survival. He took the knife. He did not put it back on his belt. He held it. "Ada," he said, and his voice was raw. "We have to save Sage," she said. He looked at the tent flap, where the snow was drifting, sealing them in. "We cannot. The pass is closed. The mill is... It is a day's journey. Even without this, by the time we get there..." "Then he is..." "No," Wolf said. His mind was working. He looked at the knife, at her. "Bly is not at the mill, not in this. He is a coward. He left his men. He would leave Sage. He is back in Ash Ford. He will be at the hearing." "The hearing," Ada whispered. "Jensen said, at dawn. It is almost dawn." Wolf said. He could feel it, the subtle change in the storm's pitch. "The pass is closed to the west, to the mill, but the east slope, the one that leads to the town. It is a straight, steep drop, dangerous, but fast." He looked at her, and his eyes, in the near darkness, were burning. "He thinks we are trapped. He thinks we are hiding. He thinks Sage is his only card. But we have the drum," Ada said, "and the ledger, and my testimony." "We will not rescue Sage with violence," Wolf said, his hand closing around the handkerchief-tied hilt. "We will not go to the mill. We will go to the hearing. We will go to them. This was the turn. This was the moment. Not a desperate, bloody rescue. A full, public confrontation. They will arrest you, she said, her voice full of fear. They will arrest the man on the poster, he said. But you will be there. Jensen will be there. Mita. We will bring the drum. We will bring the ledger. We will bring the truth. He looked at her. I will not stand alone. No, she said, her voice clear and strong. You will not. After this storm, we will speak before the people. He nodded, a sharp, final gesture. Let the truth hold us. He did not release her. He simply pulled the buffalo robe tighter, a shield against the dying storm. And in the fragile, shared warmth, they waited for the dawn. The storm broke as suddenly as it had begun. The wind, which had screamed like a banshee, died to a hollow, exhausted sigh. The world, which had been a roaring white chaos, was now a silent, blinding white canvas. Dawn, Elijah Taka said. His voice was rough. They were the only two living things in a world of white. Ada, cramped and stiff from the shared warmth of the buffalo robe, looked at him. The intimacy of the night, the confession, the shared breath in the dark, had forged something new. It was a fragile, terrifying thing, and it was now exposed to the merciless light of day. We go, he said, not to her, but to the mountain. The descent from Black Crow Pass was not a walk. It was a controlled fall. Wolf moved with a speed that was not human, finding purchase in impossible places. His moccasins seeming to grip the snow-covered rock. He had tied the rescue rope he had taught her to use around her waist, anchoring her to him. She was his liability, but he had not left her. They fell out of the snow line and into a world of mud and new, angry water. The sudden thaw, combined with a warm, driving rain in the lower valley, had turned every dry gully into a torrent. They reached Ash Ford as the sun, a pale, watery eye, tried to break through the clouds. The town was a quagmire. The main street was a river of mud. The hearing was not in the courthouse, which was a flimsy, half-finished structure. It was in the grain barn at the end of the street, the largest, most solid building in town. They could feel the tension before they opened the door. It was packed. The air was hot, wet, and thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, damp wool, and fear. On a raised platform of grain sacks, a man in a black suit sat behind a rough plank table. This was the circuit judge, a man with a heavy jowl and dead, bored eyes. Beside him, looking smug and clean, was Mercer Bly. Dotted through the crowd, acting as sergeants-at-arms, were Bly's men, their rifles held casually. The townspeople were there. The farmers, Jensen and the others, were clustered to one side, their faces grim. The pastor from the First Methodist Chapel was there, his hands clasped, his face troubled. And, in a silent, stoic line against the back wall, were Mutta and 4 elders from the Red Willow people. They were wrapped in blankets, their faces carved from wood, watching. When the barn door creaked open, every head turned. The silence was absolute. Wolf stood in the doorway. He was a vision from the wild, his hair matted, his buckskins dark with melted snow. He was not carrying his rifle. He was carrying the great drum. He had tied it to his back, and it loomed over him like a sacred shield. At his side, her dress torn and stained with mud and the dried, dark blood of the gunman, was Ada Mae Fletcher. Her hair was loose, plastered to her head, but her chin was high. She was wearing the red willow amulet Mutta had given her. "My God," someone whispered. "Seize him!" Bly shouted, jumping to his feet, his hand going to his sidearm. "Sheriff, that is the man, that is the kidnapper!" The bought judge banged a gavel. "Order, Sheriff. You will arrest that man." The county sheriff, a man in Pike's pay, stepped forward, his rifle leveling. "Taka, you are under arrest." "No." Jensen, the farmer, said, His voice was a low growl. He and two other farmers, men who had been at the backfire, stepped in front of Wolf. "This is a hearing," Jensen said, his voice shaking but loud. "We are here to speak on the water, and we will speak." "This is not a hearing," the judge said, his face mottling. "This is the sentencing. The man is a wanted criminal. The woman is his hostage." "I am not a hostage," Ada said, her voice, clear and high, cut through the thick, male-charged air. "I am a witness." She walked forward, leaving Wolf's side. She stood in the center of the barn, alone. "My name is Ada Mae Fletcher. I am the stepdaughter of Judge Silas Pike, and I am here to tell the truth." "This is a farce," Bly shouted. "She has been bewitched. She is a fallen woman. Look at her." "You will be silent, Mr. Bly," the pastor said, his voice a sudden, cold crack of authority. "The woman will speak." Ada began. She did not stumble. She laid out the facts, her voice cold and precise, as if she were lancing a wound. "I was sent by my stepfather," she said, and the crowd gasped. "I was sent with this." She held up the fake letter, her hand steady. "A forged invitation. I was sent with this." She held up the now empty copper tube, its seal broken. "A tonic. He called it chloroform, to render Mr. Taka unconscious. And I was sent with a dowry of blasting charges to destroy the mother's spring." A low, horrified murmur ran through the crowd. "I was sent," she continued, her voice dropping, "to accuse him of the very crime Mr. Bly is now crying. I was to be the ravaged virgin. He," she pointed to Bly, "was to arrive with witnesses and find me. This was the plan, to steal the water by destroying a man's name." "Lies," Bly roared. "She is a harlot. She is in love with a savage. I have proof." He reached into his coat and threw a small, square card onto the table. Proof from Tom Lyle. He took it before he disappeared. A photograph. The judge picked it up. He looked at it, and a slow, ugly smile spread across his face. He held it up for the crowd. It was grainy. It was taken from a distance, but it was unmistakable. It was Ada, and it was Wolf. It was a moment in the camp, her head near his shoulder. The angle was deceptive, the shadows dark. It looked intimate. It looked, to the Puritan eyes of the town, damning. "Well, Miss Fletcher," the judge sneered. "What do you say to that? Your testimony is that of a compromised woman. It is worthless." Ada looked at the photograph. She looked at Wolf, who stood by the door, his face a mask, the great drum on his back. She saw the farmers, their faces now full of doubt. She saw the pastor, his face full of pity. She took a deep breath. She did not look at the judge. She looked at the people. "It is a lie," she said, her voice clear. "A distortion, taken by a man who betrayed us all, but—" She paused. "Let us say it was true. Let us say that, in the nights I was in his protection, he was kind to me. Let us say that, after he saved my life from a bear, and from a storm, and from Mr. Bly's own men, that I looked at him with kindness." She turned, and, for the first time, she looked directly at Wolf. "He is the most honorable man I have ever known." She turned back to the crowd. "That picture is a lie, but my choice," and her voice rang with the word, "to stand with him, is the truth. That was my choice." The crowd was stunned into silence. A woman did not have choice. Not in this. "Blasphemy," the judge whispered. Meta stepped forward from the back wall. She walked, her back straight, until she stood beside Ada. She looked at the judge. She looked at the farmers. "I am Mita," she said. Her voice was like stones rolling in a dry creek bed. "I have seen many seasons. I have seen many white men come. I have seen him." She did not point, but everyone knew she meant Pike. I saw Silas Pike, a young man, stand on this land. He put his hand on his father's grave, and he swore to the Red Willow people that he would honor the water share. He swore, and the next season, when the railroad came, he diverted the creek. He broke his vow. He has always broken his vow. That is ancient history, the judge snapped. It is yesterday, Meta said, and it is today. You talk of paper, of proof. You look at this. She flicked a finger at the photograph. Wind, smoke. She turned to Wolf. My son, show them the ledger. Wolf shrugged the drum from his back. It landed on the dirt floor with a low, resonant boom. He did not show them the paper ledger. He pointed to the drum. This, he said, his voice echoing, is the ledger. This is the water. This is the moon. This is the truth. He explained it. The moons, the carvings, the record of the water, for 100 seasons. It is a pagan toy, Bly sputtered. Is it? Wolf's voice was low. He pointed with his knife, the one with the white lace still tied to the hilt. Then look, the drum says, at the spring thaw, when the snows are heavy, the water will run. Here. He traced a line on the drum. Past the rocks, not by the new depot where Pike is building. It runs here. As he spoke, a new sound entered the barn, a low, growing roar. It was not the wind. It was not thunder. The barn doors, which were already open, burst wide. A man screamed. A 3-foot wall of muddy, churning water was plowing down the main street. The sudden thaw, the heavy rain, had been too much. Pike's shoddily built, temporary dam upstream, the one he had built to start diverting the water, had burst. The flood hit the center of town, a brown, angry fist. It tore wagons from their hitches. It smashed the window of the Good Hope Saloon. It flooded the street, a roaring river. And it did not go toward the new depot. It followed the old, deep, natural gully. It swirled around the grain barn. Exactly, precisely, as the line on the ancient drum had said it would. My God, Jensen whispered, his face white. My God, it knew. The crowd surged to the door, staring, horrified and awestruck. Nature itself had borne witness. Bly saw his power, his lies, his entire plan being washed away. He was pale, his hands shaking. He looked at his men. They were not looking at him. They were looking at the water. They were looking at the drum. One of them, his leg in a crude splint, his face pale, hobbled forward. It was the gunman Ada had saved in the canyon. He is right, the man said, his voice hoarse. She is... I was in the canyon. Shut up, Cale, Bly hissed. No, Cale said, shaking his head. I will not be damned for this. He pointed to Wolf. He had us. He could have killed us. He did not. He pinned us. And she ran into the bullets to save my life. I was bleeding out, and she saved me. He took a ragged breath. And I heard the order, 2 days before, from him. He pointed a shaking finger at Mercer Bly. He said, burn out Sage Carter. Make him an example. We need that hostage. He said it. I heard it. The crowd turned, a single, growling entity. They moved away from Bly. The barn doors banged open again. This time it was Judge Silas Pike. He was not muddy. He was dry. In his fine suit, he was flanked by the real county sheriff, a hard-faced man with a star, and 2 armed deputies. What is this? Pike bellowed, his voice cutting through the chaos. A circus, a riot? He saw Ada. He saw Wolf. His face turned purple with rage. This hearing is over, he roared. The decree is signed. The Stonewater is under the protection and management of the railroad, by order of the territorial court. The bot judge stood. That is correct. This assembly is dismissed, Sheriff. He pointed a shaking finger at Wolf. I order you to arrest that man. He is wanted for kidnapping, for assault, and for inciting this riot." The hard-faced sheriff and his deputies cocked their rifles. Their faces were impassive. They were just following orders. Wolf stood, his hand resting on the hilt of his knife, the small white knot of Ada's handkerchief a flag of defiance. Ada moved to stand beside him. Then Jensen stepped forward, standing with them, then the pastor, then Mata and the Red Willow elders. Then, one by one, the other farmers. They formed a silent, human wall, a bulwark of farmers and natives, pastors and outcasts, standing between the law and the truth. The human wall was silent, but it did not yield. The farmers, the pastor, and the Red Willow elders stood between the lawman's rifle and Elijah Taka. The water from the flood swirled around their feet, cold and brown, but they did not move. Judge Silas Pike's face was a mask of purple rage. He had the law. He had the guns. And this line of dirt farmers and savages was defying him.
"Sheriff,"
Pike roared.
"I gave you an order. Arrest that man. Shoot him if you must. But take him."
The hard-faced sheriff took a step, leveling his rifle. "Last chance. Stand aside." But Ada Mae Fletcher stepped forward. She was done being the victim. She was done being silent. She had confessed to Elijah in the storm. Now she would confess to the world. "He is not the criminal here," she said, her voice ringing. "The criminal is my stepfather, and I have his other proof." She was bluffing. She had burned the plans. She had thrown away the chloroform. But she remembered the private hearing Jensen had mentioned. "You had a private hearing, Judge Pike," she called out, her voice cutting. "With this bought judge. You signed a decree. You created a contract." Pike's eyes narrowed. "I have seen it," she lied. "A desperate, brilliant gamble. I have seen the contract that gives you the water, and I have seen the seal." The bought judge, standing behind Pike, went pale. "And it is a funny thing," Ada continued, her voice filling the barn. "About that seal, you were in a hurry, were you not? You signed it yesterday, but the seal you used, it is the old county seal, the one they replaced last month." A gasp went through the crowd. "And the date?" She pressed, her heart hammering. "You dated it 3 weeks ago, before the kidnapping, before your proof. You dated it before you sent me to the mountain. You created the evidence for a crime after you had already signed the verdict."
"That is a lie,"
the bought judge shrieked, his composure gone.
"A lie. It was illegal, provisional."
"Was it?" Muta's voice cut in. She stepped beside Ada, holding not a paper, but a small, knotted string. "The judge lies, the paper lies, but the moon does not." She looked at the judge. "Your paper says 3 weeks ago. The moon 3 weeks ago was the sliver moon, the hunger moon. Look." She pointed to the great drum. "The watermark for the hunger moon. It is low. The record shows it. But your contract, it claims high water, a flood, a danger." She turned to the people, her dark eyes burning. "He needed a danger to steal the water, the sky and the drum. Say he lies. The moon is our witness. The water," she pointed to the flood, "is our witness. His dam, his lie, is what broke." The crowd, the farmers, the townsfolk, looked at the drum. They looked at the flood. They looked at the sputtering, terrified judge. They had their proof. "It is over," the pastor said, his voice low. Mercer Bly had been silent, a snake in the corner. He saw his world ending. He saw Pike's power, and thus his own, evaporating. He would not be taken. He would not hang for what Cale, the gunman, had revealed. He pulled his sidearm. He was not aiming at Wolf. He was aiming at Ada, the source of it all. "You!" he hissed, his voice a dry rattle. But Wolf had not been watching Pike. He had been watching Bly. He had been waiting for this. He did not move toward Bly. He moved away, in a single, fluid leap, to the large grain pulley system that hung from the barn's main rafter. His hand grabbed the thick, looped rope. Bly fired. The shot was deafening in the barn. It went wide, splintering the door frame as Wolf swung, a shadow in motion. He did not swing at Bly. He swung past him. On the backswing, his legs shot out. It was not a kick. It was a sweep. He caught the rafter above the grain sacks, and in a single, impossible motion, he had looped the pulley rope around Bly's gun arm. Bly fired again, wildly, as the rope snapped tight. Wolf dropped to the ground, pulling his end. The rope yanked Bly's arm up, his pistol discharging harmlessly into the roof. Bly was jerked off his feet, his arm strung up, the gun clattering to the floor as he dangled, screaming, his shoulder popping from its socket. Wolf did not go to him. He did not hit him. He just tied the rope, fast and clean, to a support post. He left Bly hanging, disarmed, neutralized, and humiliated by the simple tool of a farmer's barn. The fight was over in 3 seconds. No one else was shot. Wolf had kept his promise. "And now you," Wolf said, his voice quiet, turning to Silas Pike. The judge was alone. His hired gun was dangling. His bought judge was cowering. The sheriff and his deputies were looking at the crowd, their rifles suddenly very heavy, their faces full of a new, dawning realization. They were the law, but they were not on the side of justice. Pike was an animal, trapped, and like an animal, he lunged. He pulled a small, silver derringer from his waistcoat pocket. He grabbed the closest person to him, a shield, a hostage. He grabbed Ada. He pressed the tiny, pearl-handled gun to her temple. "Back!" he roared, his voice a choked, panicked shriek. "All of you back, or I will kill her. I will kill the harlot myself." Ada went rigid. She could feel the cold, small circle of the muzzle against her skin. Wolf froze. His face, which had been cold, turned to a mask of pure, white-hot fury. His hand went to the knife at his belt. "No, Wolf," the pastor said, his voice quiet, holding up a hand. "Do not let him win that way." The pastor stepped forward. "Silas," he said, his voice calm. "Silas, look at me. You are in God's house. Silas, this is a barn, but it is God's house today. You will not do this." "He will," said a new voice. It was the blacksmith, a man as wide as he was tall, who had been silent until now. "He will, because he is a coward." The blacksmith stood next to the pastor. "Put the gun down. Judge, you have lost the water. You have lost the town. Do not lose your soul." "My soul," Pike laughed, a high, broken sound. Spittle flew from his lips. His eyes were wide and mad. "My soul, this bitch, has cost me everything." He cocked the hammer. The pastor did not flinch. "Then you will have to shoot me first." He stepped, slowly, deliberately, in front of Ada, blocking Pike's gun. And in that second of distraction, as Pike's eyes widened, shocked at the pastor's move, the blacksmith acted. He did not punch. He simply moved, his great arms enveloping Pike, pinning his gun arm to his side like a bear crushing a branch. There was a muffled pop, a thud. Pike cried out. The gun had gone off, discharging into the blacksmith's thick, leather apron. The blacksmith roared, not in pain, but in anger. He lifted Pike off his feet and threw him, bodily, into the mud. Pike landed, a heap of fine wool and ruined ambition. The derringer was gone. The blacksmith stood over him, breathing hard, the front of his apron smoking. It was over. The hard-faced sheriff took a long, slow breath. He looked at the chaos. Bly, tied and hanging. Pike, disarmed and muddy. The gunman, Cale, sitting, head in his hands, a confessed arsonist. The sheriff uncocked his rifle. He walked over, not to Pike, but to the bought judge, who was trying to slip out the door. Judge, the sheriff said, his voice flat. I think you and I need to ride back to Cheyenne, and we need to talk to the Attorney General. The judge fainted. A vote, Jensen said, his voice rising, full of a new, raw power. I call for a vote. We are the people of this valley. The water is ours.
He is right,
the pastor said, helping the blacksmith check his apron, which had saved his life. We will form a new compact by the will of the people. And so, in a wet, muddy barn, with a criminal hanging from the rafters and a tyrant weeping in the mud, the town of Ashford found its future. They did not vote for a mayor. They voted for a cooperative, the Stonewater Water Cooperative. It would be managed, as Mata had suggested, by a council of 3, 1 farmer elected, 1 red willow, chosen by Mata, and 1 member from the town. I nominate Ada Mae Fletcher, Jensen shouted.
Seconded,
the blacksmith roared. The vote was a wave of raised hands. It was unanimous. The county court case, the sheriff said, would be reopened. The charges against Wolf were dismissed. The charges against Pike and Bly were just beginning. In the chaos, no one saw the other 2 deputies, the ones who had come with Pike, quietly unpin their badges, slip out the back, and ride east. The corrupt law was in retreat. No one noticed that Tom Lyle, who had been the source of the false photograph, was never found, never brought to justice. That was a cost for another day. The people, the farmers, the Red Willow elders, they gathered. They were cheering. They were crying. Jensen was hugging Wolf, who looked profoundly uncomfortable. Mutta was holding Ada's hand, a small, proud smile on her face. Ada was dazed. She was a compromised woman, a harlot on a poster, and they had just elected her to their council. She was in the center of the crowd, the center of the noise. But she felt a sudden, profound silence. She looked for him. He was standing by the door, away from the celebration, watching her. The great drum was at his feet. His face was unreadable. He had won. He had saved his valley, his people, his name. She pushed her way through the happy, weeping crowd. Jensen, the pastor, they were all patting her on the back. She did not stop. She stopped in front of him. He was a foot taller than her, a man from another world, her world. You are a part of their council, he said. His voice was quiet. It seems so, she whispered, her hands shaking. He looked at her. He had saved her. She had saved him. They had been to hell and back, and now there was the future, a future in a town, a future on a council. He did not reach for her. He did not smile. He did not offer her a ring or a home. He looked into her eyes, and his gaze was as deep and clear as the mother's spring. He asked her the only question that mattered, the same question he had asked her on the mountain. The choice. Do you still choose? He asked. His voice was low, for her alone. But in the center of that barn, it was the only sound she heard. Ada Mae Fletcher looked at the man who had seen her at her very worst, at her most deceitful, and who had trusted her with his life. She looked at the man who had disarmed himself, not his enemy. In front of the town, in front of the pastor, in front of Mita, in front of the new world they had just built, she nodded. Yes, she said. The chaos of the barn did not end. It spilled out into the muddy street, transforming from a confrontation into a community. The flood, which had been a terrifying witness, was now a shared enemy, a shared task. The line of farmers and Red Willow elders, which had formed to protect Wolf, did not break. It reformed, turning into a work brigade. Under the gray, weeping sky, the town of Ashford began to heal itself. The levee, Jensen said, his voice hoarse, pointing to the water that was now threatening the mercantile. If we do not turn it, it will take the whole street.
We need a council,
the pastor said, and the blacksmith. his apron singed, nodded. "We have a council," the blacksmith said, his voice a low rumble. He looked at Ada. And so, Ada Mae Fletcher, the harlot from the poster, found herself standing on the porch of the mercantile, her hands still stained with mud and blood. Directing the men, she was no longer a pawn. She was, improbably, a leader. "Jensen, take your men to the East Bank," she said, her voice clear, no trace of the tremor it once held. "We need to use the grain sacks, the blacksmith. Sir, we need every shovel you have." They looked at her, and they did not see the judge's disgraced stepdaughter. They saw the woman who had faced down Pike. They saw the woman who had run into the bullets. They did not hesitate. They moved. Wolf did not stay in the town. He was not a man for levies or committees. As the townspeople worked, he took 3 of Jensen's men and Mutah's 2 nephews, and he walked up the flow, to the source. He was a man of the mountain, a man of the water. He was not just a guardian. He was now its surveyor. He led his own small, blended team, reading the new, angry pulse of the land, finding the breaks, the weaknesses, the places where the water's newfound strength could be respected and guided, not damned and dominated. He was no longer an outcast. He was a resource. He was the connector. The legal aftermath was swift, but cold. Mercer Bly, his shoulders set and bound, his face a mask of white, silent rage, was put in irons and loaded onto a wagon. The hard-faced sheriff was taking him, and the gunman Cale, and the bought judge, back to Cheyenne. As Bly was loaded, his cold, pale eyes found Ada. He said nothing, but his look was a promise this was not over. Silas Pike was a different matter. He was not in irons. He sat in his hotel room, under guard. The charge was not kidnapping, or murder, or conspiracy. It was, as Ada had so brilliantly bluffed, fraud. The forged date, the improper seal. "He will not hang," the sheriff told Ada quietly, as he prepared to leave. "But he will be ruined. His contracts, they are all built on that one. It is a house of cards. You have taken the one at the bottom." Ada watched the wagon carry Bly away. She felt no triumph. She did not go to see her stepfather. She had no more words for him. She went, instead, to Jensen. "The cooperative," she said. "We must draft a suit, not for revenge, for compensation, for the farmers, for the land Pike's men burned, for Sage Carter." Sage had been found. While the town worked, Wolf's men, the ones who had been captured, had led the sheriff's deputies to the old mill. Sage was alive, dehydrated, and furious. He was brought back to his wife, a hero, a martyr, and, as he soon discovered, a member of the new Water Council. The healing of the land began with mud and shovels. The healing of the culture began with a gesture. Mutah had declared it. "The water has been given back," she said. "We must give thanks." They held a ceremony, not in the church, not in the high mountains. They held it in the town square, a muddy patch of ground between the saloon and the chapel. It was a water giving. The pastor brought his Bible. Mutah brought a bundle of sage. Wolf brought a single, smooth, gray stone, carved with the spiral of the mother spring. They placed the stone in the center of the square. The pastor read from Genesis, of water bringing forth life. Mutah lit the sage, its smoke, the red willow's breath, cleansing the air, the wind carrying it to bless the farmers. And then Naya, who had been watching Ada with a fierce, quiet devotion, stepped forward. She was in charge of the water. She opened the tap on the new, simple water main. The water, clean and cold from the stone water, gushed out. The children of the town, farmers' children and red willow children, who had never played together, shrieked. They ran, fully clothed, into the spray. Their laughter was the first, true, clean sound the town had heard. Naya, her face serious, was learning from Ada how to write. Not just her name. She was learning to write the letters of the new water schedule. She was the future of the ledger. Sage Carter, his legs still in a splint, his hands already restless, had seen his new purpose. Pike's men burned my barn, he said, so I will build a new one, a workshop. He was not a rich man, but the town cooperative gave him a loan. He was opening a workshop to build new, cheap, reliable hand pumps, so that every farmer could access the water they now all shared. The old world was gone, but the new one was fragile. A rumor came, a week later, with a mail rider, Tom Lyle. He had not been found, had not been brought to justice. He had been seen, the rumor said, in Montana. He was working for a different, bigger railroad concern, a loose end, a seat of a future conflict. And with the mail rider came a letter. It was addressed to the Stonewater Water Cooperative. It was on thick, expensive paper. It was from the territorial governor, but the seal, the wax that held it closed, was not the seal of the territory. It was a strange, private crest, one Ada had never seen. A new, more powerful, and more subtle force was now aware of them. That night, Ada was not in town. She was in the High Valley. She and Elijah had been working, not talking, working, side by side, with a quiet, shared rhythm. They were not building a large house. They were building a small, simple cabin near the Mother Spring. It was made of stone from the river, and pine he had cut. It was just a frame, 4 walls, and a roof, open to the sky, a skeleton of a home. They sat on the porch of the old cabin, the one he had given her, the one with the bar on the door. The night was cold, but the stars were a hard, bright canopy. The stream whispered its song beside them. He was mending a harness, his hands strong and sure. She was holding her mother's journal. She had not planned to, but the quiet, the safety, the man beside her, it was an opening. "I used to write," she said, her voice soft in the darkness. "In this, after my mother died, I would pretend to write to her, to tell her what was happening, so I would not be alone." He did not stop his work. He did not speak. He just listened. His presence was an invitation. She opened the book. She found the entry from years ago. "Dear Mother," she read, her voice a quiet, clear thread in the dark. "Judge Pike was angry today. He said my stitching was a waste of a woman's time. He said I was as useless as you were." She paused, a small catch in her breath. She continued, "Sister Agnes showed me how to set a splint. She said my hands were not useless. She said they were strong. I wish you could see me. Mother, I am trying to be strong." She turned a page, an entry from only a few weeks ago. "Mother, he is sending me away. He calls it a marriage, but I know it is a lie. I am so afraid. I am so alone. I have this tube. It is a terrible thing. I do not know if I am strong enough. I do not know if I am doing this to be free, or if I am just as bad as he is." She stopped. She could not read the next part, the confession she had written. "You are not," he said. His hands were still. He was looking at her. "You are not bad as he is," he said. "You are the woman who held the fire. You are the one who faced the bear. You are the one who spoke in the barn." She had been a pawn. She had been a tool. She had been terrified. Now, she was a council member. She was a leader. She was the woman who sat in the dark, reading her most secret, shameful thoughts to the man she had been sent to destroy. He was a man who had lived by one rule: trust only the mountain, trust only himself. He had been a shadow, a ghost, a wolf on the edge of the world. Now, he was a teacher. He was a leader of men, white and native. He was the man who sat, his work forgotten, and listened to a woman's soul. He had learned to trust someone other than the mountain. She closed the journal. She did not need to read anymore. She looked at him, at this man of silence. "Elijah," she whispered. He put the harness down. He turned, fully, to face her. "Tomorrow," she said, "the blacksmith is bringing the glass for the windows, for the new cabin." "I know," he said. "It will be finished soon." "Yes." The air was full of the things they did not, could not say. But they had chosen. They had chosen in the barn. They were choosing, now, on the porch. She looked at the new frame, its dark, hopeful bones, outlined against the stars. "It is a good frame," she said. "It is a strong frame," he replied. The wedding was not a wedding. It was a cementing. It happened in the town square, which was no longer a patch of mud, but a new, green common, watered by the cooperative. Ada did not wear a white dress or a veil. She wore a simple, clean dress of blue calico. Elijah Taka did not wear a suit. He wore the buckskins of the mountain, but they were clean, and at his belt, the knife with the small, white lace handkerchief was still tied to its hilt. The entire town was there, Jensen and the farmers, their faces scrubbed, their hats in their hands, the blacksmith and the mercantile owner, the children, Red Willow and White, who now played together by the new water pump. They stood, not before the pastor's altar, but before the new center of the town, the gray, spiraled stone from the mother's spring. Two people stood with them. The pastor, his Bible in his hand, and Mita, her hands holding a single, thin, strong thong of deerskin. The pastor spoke first, his voice clear in the morning air. He did not read the usual scriptures about a wife's obedience. He read from the Song of Solomon, of the voice of the beloved, and of a love as strong as death. Then Mata spoke. She did not speak to God. She spoke to the earth. She spoke in her own language, a prayer to the wind, to the water, and to the stone, asking them to witness this joining, not as a binding, but as a weaving, two strong threads, side by side, making a stronger whole. As she spoke, the pastor, in a move that would have been unthinkable a month ago, rang the chapel bell. It was not a call to prayer. It was a peal of joy, the sound of the bell, the sound of the new town, mingled with the ancient, quiet words of the Red Willow. Meta took Ada's right wrist. She took Elijah's left. She placed them, one on top of the other, on the spiraled stone. She began to wrap the deerskin thong around them, lashing them gently but firmly, together.
"You have chosen," Mata said, her voice loud for all to hear, in English. "You have chosen in the storm. You have chosen in the flood. You have chosen in the fire. Now, you choose in the sun. This," she tugged the knot, "is the tie of a choice. It is not iron. It is hide. It is strong, but it can be broken. Only your choice, every day, will hold it." "What God has joined," the pastor said, his voice thick with emotion as he placed his hand over theirs. "And what the mountain has witnessed, let no man and no law put asunder." They were bound. Ada, her hand tied to his, turned. She did not speak to Elijah. She spoke to her town, to her council. "Mita is right," she said, her voice clear, carrying over the crowd. "We have all made a choice. We have chosen to live together. We have chosen to share. Judge Pike, and men like him, they believe that water and land and people can be owned." She looked at Jensen, at the blacksmith, at Naya. "But we have learned the truth. Water does not belong to the man who finds it, or the man who is strongest. Water belongs to everyone. Water belongs to those who keep it for tomorrow." It was her declaration. It was their new law. The town, the farmers, the Red Willow. They did not cheer. It was too profound for cheering. They simply nodded.
They raised their hands. They agreed. Later, the sound of hammering could be heard. Sage Carter, his leg now healed, was in his new workshop, the sound of his progress echoing. The new, shared irrigation ditches, which Elijah had helped survey and the farmers had helped dig, were running. A small, clever water wheel, designed by the blacksmith, was turning, pumping a steady, clean stream into the new town reservoir. A cistern lined with willows. Wild horses, brave in the new peace, came down from the foothills to drink from the overflow. The legacy was not just in the water. It was in the new office in the mercantile, a single, large, leather-bound book, the Stonewater Water Cooperative Ledger. On the first page, it was not a law. It was a promise. It stated in simple terms, the compact. If the rains failed, if the drought returned, the council would divide the scarcity. The town would go thirsty before the farms failed, and the farms would go thirsty before the mother spring ran dry. They would share the hunger, as they had shared the fear. And if the flood came, if the snows were too heavy, they would open the dams and share the abundance, letting the water run, protecting both the high ground and the low. It was signed 3 names at the bottom. Mita, her signature a winding, beautiful mark, like the spiral on the stone. Elijah Taka, his name written in a strong, clear, angular script. And Ada Mae Fletcher, her signature clear and steady, the hand of a woman who was no longer a pawn, no longer afraid. That evening, the first train since the flood arrived, the whistle, which had once been a sound of invasion, of Pike's hungry ambition, was just a sound. It was a train arriving at a town that was ready. It brought mail. It brought new settlers. Who would be told? Not by a corporation, but by a council. What the rules of the water were, the town was not against progress. It had simply, and at great cost, set the conditions. The future was not a promise of peace. It was just a promise of fairness. That night, Ada and Elijah did not stay in the town. They walked to the high valley, to the new cabin. It was finished. The windows were in, the glass reflecting the starlight. The door was made of strong pine. It was not a large house, but it was theirs. They stood on the small, new porch. The wind, the true, constant voice of the granite range, whispered through the pines. It was not the shriek of the storm. It was the breath of the mountain, cool and clean. He was a man of silence. She was a woman who had found her voice. They did not need to speak. She looked at his hand. He was still wearing the knife. The small, white scrap of her mother's handkerchief was still knotted on the hilt. It was worn, stained with mud and work, but it had held. She stepped toward him. He did not pull her. She simply moved into the space that had always, she now knew, been waiting for her. He did not wrap his arms around her. He simply stood, a rock, a tree, a man. Ada leaned her head and rested her forehead against the center of his chest, against the solid, steady beat of his heart. She closed her eyes. She felt his hand, the calloused, warm, strong hand. Come up. He did not stroke her hair. He did not caress her. He simply laid his hand over hers, the one that was resting over her own heart, his fingers laced with hers, pressing them tight. He lowered his head until his own forehead rested against the top of hers. They stood, bound not by deerskin, but by a shared, quiet breath. They stood, their hearts beating, a single steady rhythm against the silence of the mountain and the promise of the water. They were free. Thank you for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are listening from. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to our channel, Wild West Tales, like this video, and give it a hype to help more people hear this story.